before. I've realized that YouTube takes objection to songs being recorded, and it's giving me copyright warnings. So I did not start the recording at the time when the song was going on. For people who don't know my relationship with Sharon, and maybe she also doesn't know. So we met at Matrix Reimprinting. She's a color lady. She's a lady who worked with little bottles which had colors.
Wow.
Yes. And I'm talking about way back in 2008, 2009 is when I met her for the first time in UK. I was very fascinated by just looking at her. She would walk around with these bottles all around, and she would talk about them. And I would look at her and say, oh my God, she's a magic lady. You know how you have sometimes that look in your eye and you say, oh my God, she's doing something that's so amazing. And I wish I could know a little bit more about it. To be really honest, I wasn't in the land of colors at that time. Maybe because I was going through my own trauma and I had a lot to sort in my life. And when the traumas got sorted out in my life, the colors came back. So maybe that's the time when I started learning colors, but not the way Sharon does it. Her way of doing colors is entirely different. If she ever has time and we could ever coordinate, which I think will happen, I would love her to do that colors in India. And I know where they're available in India now, so you don't have to carry anything. It's just a little bit of yes, I know where exactly they are available, and we could get hold of all the colors in India, those bottles. So the research is already done. She's been in Matrix Reimprinting for a very, very long time, and she does birth. She used to do birth reimprinting. I am sure she does birth techniques in different styles, and she's a lady who's probably helped a lot of babies to come back into this world in their mother's head in a better way. And that's changed those babies' lives. And she was the first person who made me aware that a child inside the womb is as good as child outside the womb. Thank you very much. Over to Sharon. And maybe I'm not pronouncing her name well, but that's how I probably say her name, Sharon. So please go ahead. Please go ahead and be who you are today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Alrighty. So I have nothing really planned that I wanted to talk with you about. So what I'm kind of hoping is I'm going to get started doing some talking. And if any questions pop into your head that you want, or about subjects that you want me to talk more about, then I'm happy to do that too. It works a lot easier when there's a two-way conversation, so I'm happy to answer questions. But yeah, I discovered EFT in 2007, and I think it was around 2009 Carl Dawson started developing matrix reimprinting, so I was in right at the beginning of that. And I created, or I had an experience with a lady, and for those of you who have read my book, this story is chapter 1 in my book, and we call Caroline chapter 1. But this is really the beginning. It was like a co-creation, if you like, between myself and Caroline, this technique of healing birth trauma. And Carl was always telling me, you know, if you want to be successful, you have to have a niche. And I was always like, going, no, I want to work with everybody. You know, I don't want to have a niche. I don't want to have a specific area. And he's going, no, really, Sharon, if you want to be successful, you need to have a niche. And the niche, I would say, found me. It was, like I said, a co-creation between myself and Caroline. And basically, Caroline was pregnant, about 5 months pregnant with her 3rd child. And she was in a lot of fear of giving birth. And when I asked her to tell me about the fear, she said that she'd previously given birth to 2 boys beforehand. She said both labours had been long. They had medical intervention that she hadn't wanted, and it was pretty traumatic for her to giving birth, and she had trouble breastfeeding afterwards. So I got her to tap on the fear. Now, I'm kind of guessing that most of you guys that are listening to this are already aware of EFT and probably matrix reimprinting, or do I need to just talk a little bit about that? Anu, can you tell me here?
Yeah, everything is fine. Everything is fine.
Everything is fine. I don't need to talk about EFT or matrix.
Maybe one, two sentences, please. Yes.
1 or 2 sentences. Alrighty. Yes. So EFT or emotional freedom technique, or tapping as it's also known, is a way of focusing on a negative emotion or a negative event, and you tap on the meridian system, on the energetic system. And what that does is the way I describe it, it creates a frequency for the energetic block or the energetic emotion that you have around a subject, and it helps to clear it through the system. It helps to process the stuck emotions, if you like, that kind of, you know, get held in the body. Matrix reimprinting uses the concept of EFT tappings, but instead of tapping on yourself for the event or the emotion that you're feeling, you imagine stepping back in time, stepping into what we call the matrix, and tapping on your younger self. So those are the real sort of core differences. With EFT, you bring the event through your senses, through your body. You relive the event as if it's happening now, and you tap to help process the emotions that didn't get processed at the time. Whereas Matrix, it's your younger self is the one that's actually holding the trauma. So you would just imagine tapping on your younger self, and it creates that level of disassociation, if you like. It's a little bit less traumatic for people, especially if it's a really big trauma, to work on their younger self who had the trauma rather than bring it through their body senses themselves. So when I asked Caroline to tell me about this fear she had, it was a very big fear. The doctors had told her that after the first birth experience, don't worry, no 2 birth experiences are ever the same. So giving birth the second time is going to be better than giving birth the first time. And when baby number 2's labour turned out to be exactly the same as baby number 1, of course, she's not believing anybody now that tells you that baby number 3 is going to be different. So we just tapped on the fear. We just got her to tune into the body, feel the fear, and we tapped and helped to lower that fear that was going on in her system. And then I asked her to step back in time, back into her memory, into the matrix, and go back to that first event of giving birth to her first son. Now, when she stepped back into the picture, she went back to the time when she first got to hospital. They had put a drip in her arm to induce the labour. They had put a baby monitor strap around her belly, to monitor the baby's heart. So when she tunes in and asks her younger self, how are they feeling, or how's she feeling? Her younger self was feeling frustrated. Her younger self was feeling trapped because she couldn't get off of the bed. What her body wanted for her was for her to get up and move around, and she couldn't do that. So we tapped on her younger self for feeling trapped, for feeling frustrated, but also she was feeling very scared because the heartbeat monitor of the baby kept dipping. So they kept sort of coming in, the nurses kept coming in and humming and ahhing and telling her that wasn't a good sign because the heartbeat started dipping. So we tapped on her younger self. We told her younger self, look, everything's going to be fine. You're going to give birth to a healthy baby boy. So, you know, don't worry about the heartbeat monitor. In fact, let's take it off and let's get you up and moving around. And that kind of changed how she was feeling in the moment. So we processed the emotion, we found the belief, and the belief was, I'm trapped, I'm powerless, I can't get up, I can't do what my body wants me to do. So and then I asked her to move on to the next point of trauma. And the next point of trauma was the midwife came in and basically kept telling her, look, you know, you're only 3 centimeters dilated, you've been laboring for a long time, you're getting tired, you're in a lot of pain, why don't you have an epidural? And she was going, no, 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 I don't want an epidural, I want a natural birth. And she was saying, but I really, you know, I really want a natural birth experience. And the nurse was, the midwife was just kept on and her going, look, you're only 3 centimeters dilated, you've been laboring for a long time, why don't you have an epidural? And then in the end, she kind of gave in and she agreed to an epidural. So it took 2 hours for the anaesthetist to come along and give her the epidural. And just after he did, then the midwife checked her again and went, oh, okay, so now you're 9 centimeters dilated. You could have given birth naturally, but never mind, there you go. And it was in that moment that Caroline completely lost trust in the medical profession. Because had the midwife checked her just before the epidural was given, then she wouldn't have needed the epidural. So when we asked her younger self what did she want to happen here, she said she wanted the midwife to be sent out of the room because she didn't trust her anymore. And when I asked her who would she trust, who would be that safe person to bring in, this beautiful angel called Annie stepped into the picture. And then the rest just kind of happened naturally. Once Annie was on the scene and younger Caroline was feeling more relaxed and trusting the person that was going to help her give birth, the birth happened naturally. She was holding her son, she was breastfeeding him, and she was doing the eye-to-eye contact and going through the bonding process, at which time I didn't know much about the bonding process, but she did. So she took herself through that process. Now, some people may say, well, that's just fantasy, that didn't happen. And yes, that is fantasy, and yes, that didn't happen in reality. But in Caroline's mind, in her subconscious, that was now rewriting what originally happened. And she now has a more positive feeling about it, because actually our subconscious and our conscious mind doesn't actually know what's real and what is made up. So when we're visualizing something, or let's just say we have a fear about something terrible happening, like, you know, we're all locked down in, or most people are locked down in their houses right now, and the fear comes from what we perceive the future fear to be. It's not actually about what's happening right now, because right now in this reality you guys are all sat in your house and right now you're all safe. But your fear goes off into the future, creating this reality. So, and then your body starts responding, your heart rate goes up, your body starts releasing adrenaline and cortisol. And so what we're doing is we're changing the perspective about what happened. And when that changes for the mother, somehow it changes it for the baby too. And this is the strange thing about what we're doing with this process, is because when she was tapping on her younger self, one thing I didn't mention is that I also asked her to tap on the baby, because the baby gets in distress. And not a lot of people are very still of the belief that babies are not conscious beings, they have no awareness, so they don't remember birth. And that's true, we don't consciously remember birth, but everything that happens to us from conception onwards is recorded in the baby's subconscious. And there is awareness in the present moment. So when things are happening, the baby senses the world through the mother's perception of the world. So if mum's feeling safe, she's feeling calm, then that's the messages, if you like, the baby gets. And the baby gets messages through the hormones that are coming through the placenta in the blood. So mum's feeling safe and happy, you've got the good hormones coming through, mum feeling stressed. I mean, I really feel sorry for a lot of women that are pregnant right now with this coronavirus stuff going on, because, you know, there is a perceived threat, which means that the body's going to be releasing a lot more cortisol, is going to be releasing a lot more adrenaline, and that's going to be imprinting on the baby. not only physically, but also emotionally as well. So how mum feels, her thoughts, her feelings, her emotions get imprinted on the baby. So by going back in time and working on the birth with the mother, it makes changes for the child too. And I guess it kind of makes sense when you think about us all being connected, and especially the connection between mother and baby as well, or mother and child is very strong, because basically while the baby's in the womb, the baby feels like, you know, it can't separate itself from mum, and that connection can, you know, continue throughout life really. So going back to Caroline's session, we asked her younger self where we needed to go next, and her younger self said, well, you need to go back and look up your own birth. So, and this is the other aspect of the work that I do. It's not just about working with mothers who have given birth to a child, but it's also about working with anybody who's had a traumatic time with their own birth process as well. So Caroline, in her mind's eye, kind of like stepped into the picture with her mother, who was in hospital in labour with herself. And she said, what's interesting, when I asked her to tune into her mother and say, how is your mum feeling? She said she's feeling the exact same fear as I was in hospital. So we tapped on her mother for that fear that she was feeling. She was also feeling very alone because she didn't have her husband with her. So we brought in her mother, the grandmother, to come in and keep her company. And then there turned out to be an issue between those two. So we ended up tapping on mum and tapping on grandmother, and then tapping on baby Caroline in the womb. And then once mum was feeling better, the birth process continued. And she ended up being in her mum's arms, doing the bonding process with her mother. And I was about to sort of conclude that part of the session by doing what we call a reimprinting, which is basically taking the positive memory through the mind and into the body. And she suddenly said to me, she said, I feel this anxiety in my chest. And I'm thinking, well, that's not supposed to happen, because we've got a very nice positive picture here of baby and mum together. And I said to her, well, tune into that anxiety and just tell me, you know, what is it saying to you, or what information are you getting with it? And she said, what I consciously know is when I was born, she said, I was born with yellow jaundice, and I had to stay in hospital for 2 weeks underneath the special lights that they put the baby on to help sort the jaundice out. She said, but at night mum would go home to be with my older brother, and then during the day she would come back, she would be with me, she would express enough milk for the nurses to feed me overnight. She said, and this feeling is that feeling of anxiety because I'm on my own. So we went back to her baby self, who was feeling alone, feeling abandoned by mum, and we tapped on the baby self for how she was feeling. And she once we released the fear, and we explained to the baby as well, because the baby self didn't understand why mum was going away and leaving her. So we explained to the baby self that, look, it's not because mum doesn't love you, it's because A, mum wasn't allowed to stay in hospital with you for 2 weeks, and B, she had to go home and look after your brother, but it doesn't mean she doesn't love you, which is what baby Caroline was feeling. So once baby Caroline was able to understand that bit of information, if you like, then we asked baby Caroline, well, who do you need, or what do you need right now that's going to help you feel even safer? And she said, she just wants Angel Annie to come in and be with her. So that was the picture that we reimprinted, the fact that she was safe, and that even when mum wasn't there, then Angel Annie was taking care of her. So then the next part of the process is we went to the birth of her second son. And what we discovered was, because we'd cleared all the emotional energy around her first son's birth experience, there wasn't much to do with Jamie's birth, with the birth of her second son. Apart from the fact when he was born, he got stuck. So the midwife had to kind of go in and turn him, and that left him with pain in the neck. He was always complaining of neck pain. So anyway, so again, we tapped on him, we sent the midwife out, we brought Angel Annie in, and we also tapped on younger Caroline to help her relax and to create more room for the baby to turn. And then once that had happened, once he'd turned himself, he got himself out, and we then re-imprinted the picture of Caroline bonding and connecting and feeding Jamie. So doing those 3 birth experiences and including the bonding process, we were both pretty high on oxytocin, because when you go through a bonding period for real, when you are the baby bonding with mum, there's a massive release of oxytocin for both mother and the baby, and of course father too, when father's part of that process. And you know, oxytocin is kind of the love hormone. It's also the hormone that we need as women to be able to release in order to give birth. And as soon as the mother goes into fear and adrenaline enters the body and cortisol enters the body, then that knocks out the production of the oxytocin and the labor stops. So oxytocin is a really important hormone, not only for birthing, but it's also associated in bonding too. Now, if mum's traumatized by the birth experience, or baby's traumatized by the birth experiences, then that is going to block the release again of oxytocin. So the mother's going to find it very difficult to bond with her baby. Now, oxytocin is also very important in the breastfeeding process as well. So because Caroline was traumatized both times when she was giving birth, she couldn't produce the oxytocin that was able to let down the milk for the baby. So that's why she had so much trouble breastfeeding. So after doing those three birth experiences with the bonding experience, as I said, we were both pretty high because we'd gone through that experience. She had gone through that experience in her mind, and I had gone through it kind of like with her as well. And that kind of like stimulates mirror neurons in your brain as well, so you can share that experience with somebody else. And I would love to one day be able to test the release of oxytocin, not only in the client, but also in myself as we're going through the birth and the bonding process with somebody. Because the whole idea is, once we've gone through and we've cleared the trauma of what happened, is then we go back and we do the birthing process how it should have been, including the bonding process. So I'm pretty sure that if we had the ability to map the brain, and I know there are brain mapping computers out there, we could actually see the actual process that happens during bonding process actually coming alive on the screen. And I believe that, you know, that actually physically happens for us, even though we're just doing that in our mind. So as I'm kind of like looking at Caroline, I'm being drawn to her belly, and I just said to her, look, you know, there is a process in Matrix that we use with kind of visualizing future events. So I said to her, how would it be if we were to show the baby in the future how the birth was going to be? And she said, oh yes, that would be amazing. She said, in fact, it's really funny you should say that. She said, because on the drive over to this workshop today, she said, I was thinking about, you know, where I wanted to give birth, how I wanted to give birth, who was going to be there. She said, I've got myself an obstetrician that's very much into natural, sorry, the motorbikes here are very loud. I've got myself an obstetrician that's very much into natural birthing protocols, and she said, you know, I already know that I want to have a birthing pool, and I trust this guy is going to be able to help me, you know, safely deliver my baby naturally. So she already created this picture in her mind of what the room and who was going to be there. And of course we brought her husband in, we brought Angel Annie in too. So what we did is we connected with the baby, and she just spoke to the baby in her mind, and she just told the baby that this was a future event, this wasn't happening right now. Auntie Sharon is not a real midwife, but this is going to happen in about 4 months' time. And she showed the baby how the birth experience was going to be. Now, of course, the baby is also experiencing the birth of his older brothers and his mother, because she went through that process as well. So it's only recently dawned on me the fact that the baby already had the idea of what birth was going to be like, because myself and Caroline had gone through it 3 times already. So anyway, so there she is, she's projecting this image to the baby. This is how the birth is going to be, and in her mind she just shows the baby the birthing. She shows the baby the perfect birthing, the perfect position that it needs to be in order to come out. And she then goes through the bonding process, and she's feeling quite associated at this time with her future self, going through the bonding process. And again, that's the picture that we reimprint. So we're taking those good feelings, we're taking everything associated with that picture, the colors, the sounds, the feelings, the emotions, we're taking that into the mind and into the heart, and then we're sending that to every cell in our body. So it's kind of like we've created this future blueprint, if you like, for the birth to follow. And as with most sessions, I kind of thought, wow, that was an amazing session. She thought so too, but we both kind of went our separate ways. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 months later that I had an email from Carl to say, oh, I just thought I'd let you know Caroline had a baby boy. So I emailed him back and I said, fabulous, you know, do you know how the birth was? And he emailed me back again and said, no, I'm a guy, I didn't ask about the birth, but here's her email, you ask her. So I messaged her and I said, congratulations, I hear you had a baby boy, hope the birth went okay, you know, how was it, do you feel like sharing? And she emailed me back almost straight away and said, oh, we need to talk. So I arranged a time to talk with her, and of course my mind automatically goes to the negative. It's like, oh my God, she had another traumatic time, you know, we're going to have to do another session to clear up the trauma of this one. So anyway, so she come on the phone and I said to her, you know, how was that birth experience? And she said, whoa, she said, let me tell you about everything that happened after the session that we had. She said, and then I'll tell you about the birth experience. So she said, the first thing that happened, she said, was that I had lost my fear of giving birth. She said, I felt so peaceful, I felt so happy. She said, you know, even my husband noticed that there was a big shift and change in me when I got home after that session. She said, the other thing that happened, she said, was that family members were commenting about how, the word she used, it was almost like we were a close family before, but we're even closer now. So she said even one of her relatives, I think it may have been her own mother, that said something along the lines of, you guys all seem to be more bonded than you were before. The other thing that happened was that Jamie stopped complaining about neck issues. So when Caroline checked in with him, he said, no, mummy, no, the pain in my neck's gone now, it doesn't hurt anymore. So his neck issue cleared up. Now, the other thing that happened is her husband was a professional footballer, and he would go and play football, travel around the world playing football with his football team. And he, every time, or the day before he would go away to play football, she said that she realized that she used to incite an argument with him before he went away. Every single time he went away, they would end up having an argument. And she never really understood why, but all she knew was that she was angry with him for going away. And she said that changed after the session, and she suddenly realized that actually his going away to play football was re-triggering her mother leaving her alone at night in hospital. So it was re-triggering or re-traumatizing or reminding her subconscious memory of being abandoned by her mum at night. So she said, of course, she said, I don't like my husband going away because I miss him. And she said, because I love him and I miss him. She said, but I no longer have to have that argument or that row with him before he goes away. So, so she said quite a lot changed after that session. She said, but the most amazing thing that happened, she said, was when when I gave birth to Archie, she said, which was the name of her third son. She said that birth was exactly how I showed the baby it was going to be. She said it wasn't a long labor, it wasn't a short labor. She said it was a kind of medium length labor. She said, but it was totally natural. She said I didn't have to be induced. She said, I didn't have to have an epidural. She said it was totally natural. I had no pain relief. She said, in fact, there was only a couple of points, she said, that you could actually say were kind of painful. She said it was almost like, she said it was so natural. She said, I just breathed him out. She said, and when he came out, he was, you know, he was wide awake. He was very alert. She said he was peaceful, he was happy, and he breastfed very, very easily. She said, so that was totally amazing. And what is amazing on top of that is the fact that she then went on to have another son after that, and that birth experience was the same as Archie's. So, so she went on to have 2 very beautiful natural birth experiences. So it was in those moments when she was telling me this story about, especially about the changes that happened with herself, the changes that happened with the family, but also how Archie's birth is, I suddenly realized that actually this is something I could get very excited about, that I wanted to learn more about. And I suddenly felt like I described myself as being like Dorothy in Kansas, where you suddenly discovered the yellow brick road. And it's like, now you have a path to follow. So it was like I suddenly landed, and it was like, okay, now I know what I want to have as my niche. And the minute I committed to that, is the universe went, right, so you need to go here, you need this information. And I ended up going to America a couple of times, to a couple of birthing conferences there, where I met Bruce Lipton and Joseph Chilton-Pearce, and a lot of really, really amazing people in the birthing industry. Part of that was mainly thanks to a lady called Suzanne Arms, who's a natural birth campaigner in America, and she introduced me to all these amazing people. Michael Mendoza, who's a very good friend of Joseph Chilton-Pearce and Bruce Lipton. So I got to meet a lot of very incredible people and learn from them. And a lot of the information that I gathered together over about a period of 7 years, especially about birth psychology, ended up being put in my book called Heal Your Birth, Heal Your Life. And I know Anu was telling me that some of you guys have already read my book.
Yeah, I think somebody on the group also has already read your book. So yeah. Because she brought it home to show it to me. Is this the book? I said, yeah, that's the book.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, so that's how Matrix Birth Reimprinting, if you like, that's how it was birthed, if you like, how it was conceived and birthed, and through myself and Caroline. It was oh, thank you. I can't pronounce your name. I'm really sorry.
Her name is Dhruti.
Dhruti, thank you.
Yes.
She said she's read it and it's a wonderful book. Thank you. So I get messages from people all over the world, you know, thanking me for the book. It literally was, it was one of those things I never ever, I'd never had this ambition to be an author, but it was one of these things that it was like the universe was going, you have to write this down, you have to put this into a book. So I kind of just followed orders, and I went ahead and got the book, and everything about the book, everything about Matrix Birth Reimprinting, everything I do since stepping onto that yellow brick road has felt totally supported. And the book's out there doing its own thing. It's now been published in 4 other languages. And again, I haven't had to do anything to make that happen. The publishers approached me and asked if they could translate it and publish it in their countries. So so an Indian version would be very nice. So if there's any Indian publishers out there.
India reads English, so it's
okay.
not so difficult at all. But yes, it's quite possible that when this video goes out, you never know who might be interested. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm very, very interested in knowing if you've had any other experiences which were like maybe you've not written it in the book right now, but after the book went across, there were certain things that you could like say to people, hey, you know, if you stay this way, or if you have these kind of experiences, or this is an experience that I made even after the book has been released. Is there anything like that, the book people can read, but is there anything significant that stayed with you and you still haven't spoken about it, or maybe you have, but maybe today we can have the taste of it if you have anything like that? Thank you.
Okay, let me just raid my memory banks. I think the biggest learning, which I'm not sure came across so well in the book, is really about women feeling so disempowered and unheard and unvalidated by the whole of the process.
Wow. You mean to say this whole process is the only process in which they have felt invalidated, unheard, invisible?
No.
Or is it something that we as women and men, of course, because men were inside the women when they were going through that experience?
Exactly.
Is that something that you would say is very crucial? Thank you.
Yes, because when it's almost like women, we tend to just give our power away to authority, and we're kind of seeing that plays out in many different ways, especially right now with the coronavirus. We are giving a lot of our power away to those in authority, the government, the doctors that say that we have to do X, Y, and Z, and in our intuition is probably saying something different. Like, a lot of women will know that their baby's coming quickly, and the midwife will say to them, no dear, it's not coming quickly, it's going to take hours. Or intuitively they know there's something wrong with their baby, but the midwife's going, but it says, or the doctor's saying, no, your baby's fine, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, we've done hundreds of births, this is your first or second birth experience, you don't know what you're talking about. So that's one of the most common themes that I have working with people. And the other common theme that comes out is if you have a very strong negative belief about something, like I can't speak out, I can't be heard, it's not right to speak up against authority, or I'm unsafe, or whatever your predominant negative beliefs are, then when we come under a time of trauma, a time of stress, this is when they come up even stronger. So if I'm working with a pregnant woman, for instance, that's one of the areas we'll be looking at. Not only I want to do their own birth experience with them, but also clear any birth traumas that they've had giving birth to previous children, or loss of children, loss of babies, whatever. But also, let's look at those negative beliefs, because we want to change those before you get yourself into a situation where, potentially you could feel powerless and not feel like you're able to speak out here. And it's also working with the couple as well to empower the father or the partner. Doesn't necessarily mean to be father, it can be obviously another woman, but you want that birthing partner that's with you, you want to empower them to know when to speak out on your behalf when you can't as well. And I'm not sure that came across very clearly in the book, but it's certainly something that, when I'm working with people now, it's something that I tend to, this is a partnership when you're going into this birth experience, and you need to be able to trust your partner. Because if, ideally you need to be able to trust the midwife or the doctor or the nurse, depending on where in the world you're giving birth. But if you suddenly lose trust with that person, you need to know that your birthing partner is on your side. So
somebody's microphone is not off, so could you please kindly mute yourself? Thank you. I think it's Lavina, if I'm not mistaken. A very interesting question that's coming to my mind. We work so much on women because they are pregnant. But is that much work ever being done on men? because they're going to be a father.
Exactly. So yeah, I did actually dedicate the last chapter to my book to fathers. There are actually people, there's a couple of people that come to mind who only work with the fathers, because and they're both men, because they had the experience themselves where they felt very disempowered, and you know, the difference between the men and women is that women can rest back into their being energy a lot easier than men can, and men are a lot more do energy, action energy. Do, you know, you want to protect, you want to fix, you want to make things happen in order to fix whatever is going wrong in the moment, or you perceive as going wrong in the moment. But you're in this weird predicament because you haven't studied, you haven't like gone to university to know what needs to happen here with this birthing process. So you also have to give, you also have to trust the professionals, the birthing professionals, and trust that they know their job. So that really like can create a lot of problems for men, especially if they've got unclear trauma in their own either childhood or even their own birth experience can be brought up at this time as well. You know, this unconscious memories, this sensations in their body, maybe fear, anxiety coming up, but they don't know even why it's there. And it could just be that, you know, that watching your partner going through this experience is triggering their own experience. It could be because they feel powerless to actually do anything about it, because they're not in control of this situation, that, you know, they're having to hand the control over to somebody else. So the guy, and I can't remember his name, his surname, his name begins with Mark. You know, he actually had got PTSD from watching his wife giving birth. And as some of you may already know that may have studied trauma, is that the ACEs come to mind, the adverse childhood experiences. So the more childhood experiences you have, the more likely it is that you're going to end up with PTSD. So, you know, if you've had a very safe, secure childhood with very, very little trauma, then, you know, you're not going to get PTSD. But if you've had a lot of trauma and then you're experiencing this as a trauma, and again, it's that same situation of somebody else's authority is, you know, and you're feeling powerless and you're not able to change anything, then that can lead the man to have PTSD, or even, you know, almost like postnatal depression as well for men too. That's kind of a real thing. What's also fascinating is that there's a hormone, and I can't remember what the hormone's called, but Patrick Hauser talks about this in his book, that if a man is actually present at the birth and bonds with that baby, they are less likely to be unfaithful to the mother. There's something that gets released in the body, and I'll have to look up the hormone. I can't remember what it is, but it's almost like a faithfulness hormone that it does something to the father's brain that switches it into, instead of wanting to go and spread your seeds, it's like, now we need to nurture and protect this family unit. Whereas quite often it's said that the men that aren't there at the birth or don't have that bonding experience with the child, then they're more likely to be, you know, more disconnected from the family and less likely to want to be the protector and the provider for the family. So that's just a piece of information that I've kind of heard and not had experience of myself. So.
Wow. So there's another question that's coming to my mind before I open it for everyone else. Actually, there are two of them. One is, do you see a lot of women sexually or physically abused, who are having a lot more trauma during their, you know, when they're giving birth to the baby, or they're having more traumatic pregnancies? That's one. The other one is that there is a lot of research being done today, and even Meta people have been talking about it, MetaHealth people, is about when the the grandmother already has the mother in her womb. And which means you're already there in that womb. And if you could throw some light on how then grandmother's experiences are going to impact us or our children. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That's okay. And that reminds me of another bit of information about the males that I will share. So there's 3 things I want to say here. So the first one was about sexual abuse. So there's 2 things with sexual abuse. There's the sexual abuse that happens before the woman even gets pregnant. So maybe she's had childhood sexual abuse. That can be re-triggered when she's pregnant. So there's a really great book called When Survivors Give Birth by oh gosh, names are going from my head today. Phyllis Klaus and somebody else. But the book's called When Survivors Give Birth. So actually having that baby inside of you can re-trigger the sexual abuse thing that women may have experienced either in childhood or teenage or later, and may not be even associated with how you got pregnant. But it can be re-traumatizing. But of course, there's also then the next step is like birth is very, very invasive, or it can be very invasive. It doesn't have to be invasive, but it's even designed, you know, that's the way it goes. And a lot of women end up feeling very abused and violated, but they don't know why, because they make themselves wrong for feeling this, because, you know, it's very normal for the midwife to want to, you know, examine you, or the doctor wants to examine you, and there's so much indignity that happens, you know, women who end up with their feet up in the stirrups, and you know, there is just diabolical, appalling things that happen to women. And you know, I've heard a lot of stories, but one of the things that sticks in my mind is Peggy Mangan, who was on my course. She was an OB/GYN nurse in America, and the nurses are actually taught and told to observe the doctors to make sure that what they're doing is appropriate and not abusive. So you know, and so there must be a reason why they've been told that.
Wow. Wow. That's a big information.
Yes. So I've worked with a lot of women who it's re-triggered or re-traumatized their sexual abuse experience when they were younger, but also they experience it when they're giving birth as well. So the next question was
it was about the grandmom having
the grandmother. Yes. So while your mother was inside your grandmother's womb, you as the egg part that was you is being created. So that's like kind of 50% of you, if you like, are experiencing what grandmother's experiencing. So that's why there's quite often a very strong, when I'm doing the ancestral work, there's a strong link with grandmother on the mother's side. So if that grandmother, they've done studies, and it's shown that, for instance, if that grandmother goes through a famine, then it can affect you and your perceptions around food, or there not being enough food. They've also did a study with mice where, and I think this was actually the father, so this is on the father's side. So the father mice, the male mice, they would give them the scent of cherry blossom, and every time they smelt, every time the cherry blossom was put in, they would give the mice an electric shock. So they very, very quickly learned that cherry blossom was a very dangerous thing to smell, because as soon as you smelt it, you got an electric shock. And what they found was that those mice would then go on and breed, and then when those baby mice smelt cherry blossom, they would have the chemical release of shock, because their part of their brain has been changed to know that that cherry blossom is a dangerous thing.
My God, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, and what I hadn't realized till recently, and this information didn't make it in my book, but this is what I teach on my ancestral part of my training, is that and I really hadn't appreciated this, the blueprint for the sperm is once again developed inside the testes, inside their mother. And of course, the egg part of the man is also created inside the grandmother. But anyway, that's getting confusing as well. But so male babies, let's just take male babies right now. Mother's in lockdown, fear for her life because of the coronavirus, blah, 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 blah. That is going to be, if you're pregnant with a male baby, then that information is going to be part of the genetic blueprint for the sperm.
Oh my God, that's, yeah.
And of course, you know, women that are pregnant with girl babies, then this is not only going to affect their baby's development right now, because the brain development, the body development, the emotional development, the nervous system, everything is influenced by how the mother's feeling. So both male and female babies like now are going to be affected, but also the next generation to come. Right, so any woman that's pregnant right now, you know, stay as calm as you can, do as much meditation as you can, EFT, whatever you need to do to keep yourself in a very balanced state and to keep yourself out of fear, because the more fearful state you're in, the more you're going to be programming that baby, if you like. That baby's going to be developing to be a warrior, to be, you know, looking for danger everywhere. So going back to the sperm, so what happens with the sperm is there's a basic blueprint on like, it's like a stamp. This is how each sperm is produced. But up to 3 months before conception, before the sperm is being released, then other little plugins start happening to the sperm. And especially in the last few days up to the point of ejaculation and conception, is that there's more, it's like a, I see it like a Lego thing. Like, so you've got the basic platform that you build your Lego on, and this is your basic sperm, and then you plug in, so right, okay, so we need a coronavirus fearing sperm, and we need this sperm, and then that's, you know, that plug in, right, off you go. Because nature's designed it that they want the baby to have the best chance of survival, and the best chance of survival is to be able to survive in the current environment. It's no good, like, you know, if the father's, I don't know, 35 years old, it's no good having the blueprint from a 35-year-old back sperm being, you know, imprinting itself on the person right now. You need more of a current update. And again, it kind of so the mother affects the baby emotionally, but also so does the father. And they've done studies with the sperm. So if you put the sperm in a petri dish and you give the owner of that sperm mild electric shocks, the sperm will actually register those shocks.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's something. Yeah. Sharon, what happens to people, let's say abortions are so common, secret abortions. Mm-hmm. You know, I know of a lot of celebrity kids who've been through abortions where they haven't even written their correct name. And forget whether you've written your correct name or not, because abortion is not legal everywhere. But there are so many things that happen. It could be just your hormones playing, that you are pregnant and you don't want that pregnancy to go ahead, or a miscarriage. How will that, because according to Bert Hellinger and Family Constellation, they have a whole story around that. What are your views around abortion, miscarriage, and how is that going to impact the children? Thank you. I really appreciate that.
That's a very big subject.
Yeah, just if you can, you don't have to go into very deep depth, but if you can just throw a highlight on it. Thank you.
Okay. So bear in mind what I said about the mother's perception of the world having an imprint on the baby. So again, this very much depends on the mother's point of view. So, and this is quite often cultural. So for instance, if you've had an abortion in a country like Denmark, for instance, where it's like pretty normal, nobody frowns on it, nobody judges you, then they don't tend to have too many negative emotions around that event. But if you are conceived in Ireland, where abortion is banned and there's religious connotations to it, and you know, I don't know what it's like in India there, but I'm guessing there's probably all sorts of big stories and stuff built around it. So there is that element of how the mother feels about it. So if it's a miscarriage, for instance, then and depending on how the mother deals with that miscarriage, if mother takes the time to grieve the loss of that baby, and even, you know, even with an aborted baby too, there still can be a process of grieving. Yeah, maybe it's just not the right time. We're not in the right relationship. Whatever reason that somebody has to make that choice of termination, people don't normally make that choice like without any real thought about it. You know, there's usually, like, one lady I worked with was in a completely controlling, abusive relationship, and the only way she could get out of that relationship and cut any ties with this man was to have this abortion. In fact, getting pregnant was the thing that helped her get away from this man in the first place. So myself, from a spiritual point of view, I absolutely see that there is a life purpose. There is a reason why that baby comes. There's a reason why the mother makes the choice she does, and there's a reason why babies leave, whether it is through abortion, whether it's through miscarriage. But again, it's about the mother's perception. It's about how she feels about it. So she takes the time to grieve the loss, to deal with the emotions around whether that was a choice of hers or wasn't a choice of hers, because a lot of women are forced into it as well. You know, I've worked with a lot of women who it wasn't their choice at all. You know, it was their partner or their family or whatever. They were forced into that situation. So whatever it is, as long as the mother has cleared through and processed the emotion, then it shouldn't have too much an effect on the next baby. It only has an effect on the next baby if mother has still unfinished processing to do, unfinished business, if you like, around the loss of that child for whatever reason. Of course, if the mother's had maybe, you know, I've had people with stories, so like, got pregnant a couple of times when I was a teenager, had a couple of abortions, and then in my 20s I started to want to have children, and I've had 3 miscarriages. Oh my God, this is God punishing me for having the 2 abortions, and I may never get pregnant. And then we get pregnant, and then there's all that fear that we're going to lose the next one, whatever number we're up to. Then that's going to have a big impact on that baby, because mum's in fear of losing the baby. She's got all the guilt, she's blaming herself, she's got unprocessed grief from the loss of the other babies, and of course fearful that this one's going to go the same way, and we're not going to even connect with this baby just in case we lose this one and we just can't bear the pain of it. So we really just disconnect from the baby, and the baby doesn't feel wanted, doesn't feel connected, doesn't feel loved, just basically feels ignored. And you know, I've worked actually with a lot of people whose baby self, like when mum first finds out she's pregnant, she doesn't know whether she wants to keep the baby or not, and she thinks about termination, the baby will actually go and sit and hide, and it will be very, very quiet, because it doesn't want to be a nuisance, it doesn't want to be seen in case mum does decide that she is going to get rid of it. So a lot of people that then go on to not being seen, not wanting to be a problem, not wanting to be a burden to anybody, you know, just keep themselves to themselves. It may be that, you know, they learned that in the womb to keep themselves safe, they had to stay very, very small.
Wow. So I'll open right now the forum to questions, and I'm sure people have a lot of them. I have a lot of them, but I'm not going to go there. Let's give everybody a chance. So let's start with Anya. Anya, do you have any question? So just to let you know, there are people of all kinds who are therapists, who are not therapists, who haven't learned anything, who are probably for the first time on this forum. Yeah. So Anya.
I'm the second time on this forum, and I have absolutely had I have no connection with your field, Sharon. So it was very, very interesting for me to see and to listen to all of this. And wow, fantastic. Really, really great. Really great.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the information. I don't have any questions. I just am sucking it all in, you know. It makes sense. It's fantastic. I was thinking about my daughter who gave, it was quite a dramatic birth, and she had to have a cesarean then, but the child became, I don't know if you say became, but is autist now.
Right.
And I'm still trying to find out whether it was this drama of giving birth which made him become an autist. I don't know.
Would you like me to speak about that, my experience of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's yeah.
So there's usually there's three things that I find is the most common with families that have an autistic children. In fact, where I'm staying right now, I'm actually working with a family of a autistic child, and I think I'm okay to share the story of what we did, which was really amazing. So there's three common things that happen here. Is the first thing that I see is there's usually some form of birth trauma that's associated with autism, and it's usually quite a severe trauma. So it's like a life and death trauma, right? So it's not just, I say just, you know, getting stuck and being pulled out by forceps. It is like quite often baby has to be revived, for instance. So it's like a real situation where the soul kind of like really starts to leave the body and doesn't fully come back in again. So that's one of the common things that I find. The other thing is vaccinations. So usually vaccinations.
Okay.
Yeah. So the signs of autism usually show up after a number of you know, just like the little boy that I'm working with right now, he got very sick after one of his vaccinations when he was 2.5. This child is super bright, super shy. He could speak 10 languages at 2.5. He could see a written sentence on the side of a lorry, and he would come home later that day and he would recreate that sentence. So it's almost like he has a photographic memory. And he had a bad reaction to one of his vaccinations. This was in Australia, and he got a very high fever. And then from that day onwards, he lost his speech, he's lost his ability to speak all these different languages, and he lost his ability to write. So now the third common denominator, because that doesn't mean that every child who has a birth trauma and a vaccination is going to get autism, and because that's not how it works, is there are a lot of kids coming to the planet right now who are super sensitive. They are super intuitive. They're very different, if you like, to how we were when we were born. They're super smart. They're just sensitive to everything. And I think it's the combination of those three. I think, you know, because he was so bright, because he was super sensitive, because he had all these amazing gifts, it's almost like the the trauma of the birth, and then you're putting into the body some very unnatural products, especially the heavy metals in the mercury and the aluminium that's in it. And the way Suzy Miller describes it, so if you look up SuzyMiller.com, SUZY Miller.com, her book's called Awesomeism. And she sees these kids, she can telepathically communicate with these kids. In fact, she's going to do some work with the little boy here for me. And what she finds is that they all of them have these super sensory abilities that you know, us as older souls don't have. They have that. So when the heavy metals get put into the body, it's like, you know what I said, it's like that birth trauma where they nearly die and their soul kind of gets bumped out of their body and their soul starts to come back in again, but then you put in the heavy metal and that soul just bumps back out again. And the first little boy that she encountered was basically, she could see his light body just floating above his body. And this is what I found with the kids that I work with, is that once you clear their birth trauma, it's like you're making it safer for them to come back into the body. And I'm still working on his birth trauma, but the next thing after that is I'm going to take him back to that. I'm going to like almost rewind time with him and take him back to how he was, or ask him to go back to that time before he had the vaccination. But I'm also going to work with the mum, and we're going to go back in time, and because that was quite a trauma for her to have, you know, a very sick boy after his vaccinations and stuff. So we're going to go back and we're going to work on that trauma. Now, I don't know what effect it's going to have on him, but I know that I've had varying different types of success with people, with children, when you help them come back into their body. So by releasing the trauma, detoxing them, if you can find a way to detox them from detoxing the heavy metals from the body, then I've seen a lot of people have amazing success with autism with this, because it's the aluminium, it's the mercury, the other products that are in vaccinations that is just too much for their system to cope with, because they're already super sensitive. And that's why you get autistic kids that will go into a supermarket, for instance, and they just can't cope with the strip lighting or the overwhelm of the sound, and they'll start doing the skimming, or they'll start, you know, having complete meltdowns because they can't cope with the sensory overload. So they're already hypersensitive kids, and you add in the trauma, you add in the vaccination trauma into their body, and that's enough just for them not to be totally present in their body.
Thank you very, very much. You really, wow. I have bumps, I'm in tears. I'm in tears. You know, you confirmed a little bit what I was guessing as a mom, you know, but, and when he was born, the minute, until he screamed took a while. But then when I looked at him in his eyes, I could see that something was very wrong. I could see it right away. My daughter didn't see it. I didn't tell it to her because I didn't want to upset, you know, but I could see in his eyes that something was wrong. And, oh.
Yes. So
I'm happy that I'm leaving you now.
Okay. You got the answer you needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do whatever you can to make it safe for him to come back into his body.
Thank you.
So that's homeopathy, whether it's matrix, whether it's whatever it is, detoxing, whatever you need to do to help him come into his body.
Wow.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you. Thank you, Anya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Nika, do you have a question? Sharing. Nika, my dear. Nika. Okay, there is a question on the forum about surrogacy, surrogate mom.
Yep.
Do you have, can you try?
Right, I'm not seeing that. Can you read it to me?
It's saying any experience with surrogate pregnancy, and yeah, and they also need the name of your book.
Right, so the book's called Heal Your Birth, Heal Your Life. And it's available on all the Amazons. It's available as an audiobook and a Kindle as well. So my website, I have two, magicalnewbeginnings.com and also healyourbirthbook.com as well.
Dr. Manobrahma, you can unmute yourself and talk to us. Thank you.
So,
and whoever wants to ask question, please raise your hand so I go directly to those people.
Was that the question about surrogacy?
Yes, I asked that question. Do you have any experience regarding surrogacy pregnancy or any traumas related to surrogacy pregnancy?
Not that many, to be honest with you. IVF, I have a few stories, but not so much surrogacy. But I can see how an adoption as well. I don't think that I've actually had any clients that were born to a surrogate mother, so I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is the fact that it must be a little bit similar to adoption, in the fact that you've grown up in a body that belongs to somebody else, or this is the energy field, the thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. This is who you think is mother, and then you're handed over to somebody else. And as lovely as that person is, they're still not mother that you've been with for 9 months. So now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a big trauma for people. So what I do know about with adoption is that there are varying degrees of trauma with adoption. So for instance, if a baby is born, as it would be with a surrogate, and handed straight to the adoptive parents, and with surrogacy, the real parents, if you like, are going to be part of that pregnancy too, probably talking to the child energetically quite a lot with the surrogate mother, then that baby's all gonna get to know their energy. So it's not going to be such a shock and an impact, and a gentle handover. So if somebody was going through a surrogate, if I was working with parents that had a surrogate, I would say to them, you know, let's do a very gentle handover. So be a free parent for a long period of time. Yeah, don't just hand the baby over and that's it, separation. So I don't know how surrogacy works nowadays, whether it is a gentle handover or whether it's just a here you go, here's your baby, bye bye sort of thing, like it would be an adoption. But you know, I have a friend and she was adopted, and her big trauma started when her mum got pregnant. And I don't think that pregnancy was or that conception was voluntary. Mum found out she was pregnant and tried to abort the baby by drinking lots of alcohol, I think. The baby was born 7 weeks early, taken straight away from mum, put in an incubator for 7 weeks, and then wasn't handed over to the adoptive parents for a long period of time. So then the adoptive parents then adopted another baby, which was a boy who turned out to be a nightmare because he came from a mother who was a drug addict. So he turned out to be a little what's it. So and started bullying her. So so the whole of her life was pretty traumatic, really, childhood. But the biggest traumas came early on. Whereas if you have another friend of mine who's also adopted, but her story is slightly different. You know, her mum took care of her, kind of wanted her, but knew that she couldn't keep her. She was with her mum for about 6 weeks, and then she was handed over to the adoptive parents. So she's less traumatized, if you like, than the previous lady. So no two surrogacy stories are ever going to be the same. You know, if you pick the right surrogate mother, she's going to be lovely, she's going to be peaceful, she's going to be joyful, she's going to be connecting with the baby, making that baby feel safe. Because What we want is a really good, safe, solid foundation, and then the people that are the true parents of the baby, you know, they then carry on with that peaceful, loving experience. But it could be that, you know, your surrogate's only doing it for the money, and she's, you know, behind your back smoking 30 cigarettes a day and going out partying every night, then, you know, or is living in an abusive relationship or whatever. So your child is going to, you know, your child is going to be shaped by your surrogate in those first 9 months of its life. So picking a real good surrogate mother is a very good idea. And if you are a baby that's come from a surrogate, then maybe there may be some stuff going on for you around relationships, not being able to form relationships, or not feeling safe in relationships in the negative. Or it could be that you're just really happy to be connected with everybody. It may be that an open sharing relationship is kind of what you want. So it's very hard to say unless I've got, you know, I know the people involved and I know their trauma histories and things like this, to actually say what the outcome of that is. I can speak a little bit more about IVF.
Yes, I was about to ask you the same question. If you have any experience with ladies undergoing IVF, because that's a very traumatic experience for the whole family when they don't conceive even after many chances.
Yes.
So can you just share any experience?
Yes. So yes, very highly traumatic for the woman. Again, because it's so invasive, it can also bring up abuse issues. If there's been any abuse issues in the past, sexual abuse issues, it can bring that up. And quite often, actually, infertility, if you want to take that step of, you know, why is this woman at this point of having to have IVF? Why is she not conceiving naturally? And it can quite often be because there's been a sexual abuse history that's preventing infertility, or a belief around you know, not being a good parent or something. But going back to IVF, it's a very invasive, traumatic experience. It's a highly stressful experience. And, you know, after multiple tries and then eventually when the baby can't, you know, is conceived, there's, again, if you've not grieved that process, because each failed attempt is like a loss of a baby, it's a loss of hope or a loss of a future, because, you know, as women, we can't help projecting into the future what, you know, this wonderful scenario. So each attempt needs to be dealt with very gently and lovingly, not only by yourself and your partner and by the family, but also you know, maybe by a therapist too, or by the doctors, because, you know, a lot of doctors are not in their handling of it, things are not great either. As for an IVF baby, I had one lady that I worked with who was an IVF baby, and I didn't know she was an IVF baby, and she came to me because she has this relationship issue, and the people that she was choosing, the men that she was choosing to be with, there was always a third person in the relationship. So he was either unfaithful and there was another girlfriend on the scene, or as one guy that she chose, his mother was very dominant in the relationship as well, and he was constantly trying to please his mother and the girlfriend, not in a sexual way, but, you know, she was still a very dominant force in his life. So, so there was always a third person in the relationship. So, and I forget how we got back to this, but we ended up discovering that she was actually a test tube baby. Now, of course, think about it. You have the sperm from the father, you have the egg taken from the mother, but then you have the scientist in the middle that puts them together. So there was a third person in her conception.
In India, we'll have to wonder whether we all test tube babies, because we always have a mother in the middle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
And another interesting, just on the IVF, is I had a lady I worked with who the eggs were all taken from the mum at the same time, and they were both, her and her sister were both conceived at the same time, but she then got put in the freezer for 3 years. Right, and then she came along, then she was implanted 3 years later. So the confusion that set up between her and her twin sister, who really wasn't her twin because they were 3 years apart. But she said something, she said, was it something about, I always feel frozen or something like that?
Oh my God.
Yes. Oh, somebody's just had a light bulb moment maybe. But yeah, she said, I always feel frozen. And it was like, literally, she had been frozen for 3 years.
Oh my God. So, Mr. Bhupinder Singh, you have a question? And others, if anybody else other than Aarti has a question, please raise your hand. Mr. Bhupinder, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you for the lovely session.
You're very welcome.
So I was about to ask the same question which you just answered on IVF. So I have the answer. Thank you so much.
Excellent. You're very, very welcome. You're very welcome. I don't actually know. I'm sure there is a study somewhere and I need to go and find it, but I don't know the psychological effects of being an IVF baby. I'm sure there's got to be, right? Because any form of conception has a psychological effect, as does our in utero and our birth experience. So one day I will remember to go and see if I can find a study on the psychological effects of IVF. In fact, you could probably even Google it and see if it comes up.
Aarti, you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Anu.
Hi.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so
Hi,
much
Aarti.
for all the information that you've given. It's really very, very crucial for all of us. I have one question. There are many cases that's happening nowadays wherein the heartbeat of the baby is not found, and then the baby is aborted. And it's becoming very common. Like I went through that, my sister went through that, and I know many people who are going through that, many women. If you can just put some light why such a thing is happening and it's become so common today.
Thank you.
Okay. So I hadn't realized it was a very common thing. So this is just bringing up a few questions in my mind about why is it suddenly become so common. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to guess at the answer of that. I'm trying to keep out my conspiracy mind as well. But what I do know is, and from the experiences I've had, is that from a spiritual point of view, then there's normally a contract between mother and baby for this experience. And for the baby, as a soul coming in, they may just want to just come in just for a very short period of time and leave again. I know the majority of you guys are on here are from India, so I know that you have quite an open spiritual background. So I can probably quite openly say that having done a past life or a number of past life regressions myself, I know that I had a lot of experience of being that baby in the womb who was either stillborn, miscarriage, aborted, didn't survive very long, because my soul wanted to really understand what it was like. And also, on the other hand, the mother of having to make that decision, and the pain and the loss of losing a baby too. So every experience, I believe, every experience we have in life is for our soul's growth and for our learning experience. So to go through a loss of a child is very traumatic for a lot of people. But it also, sometimes it opens us up. Sometimes, women get pregnant and don't even think about getting pregnant. And it's not until that baby's gone that they go, well, you know what, actually, I would quite like to be a mother. So it opens them up to the idea of becoming a mother. It can also be a past life thing as well. I had a lady that I worked with who kept giving birth to baby boys. And she desperately wanted a little girl. And every time she had another baby, it was a boy. And then she gave birth to one baby girl, and that baby girl died very soon after birth. And she was absolutely devastated. And she just had this thing in her head, just knowing that that this desperation for having a girl was more, there was more to it. So we went into a past life, and it turned out that in this past life that actually our husband in this lifetime was our husband in that lifetime, and he was a very fixated man in the fact that he wanted his wife to have a baby boy, and she couldn't. Every time she gave birth it was a girl, and he kept killing the girls because he wanted a boy. So in this lifetime she kept giving him, giving birth to boys, but she desperately wanted to have a little girl. So we went into that lifetime and we cleared the energy for around her, for that tragic loss of all the little girls, the baby girls that were killed. So we did a lot of work around that. We did some work on her husband as well in that lifetime, and very quickly she got pregnant again with a little girl, and very successfully went on to have a successful, beautiful young girl. So there's so much more to all of this than just the normal standard answer, I think, to the question. But so many people I work with, they'll work with the loss of they'll connect with the soul of that child, and they'll have a conversation with them, and by the end of it they'll understand what it was, for what the baby wanted to experience, what they wanted to experience, what the purpose was for that experience, and come to a place of peace with it.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Let's go to the next person, Brahmri.
There's actually a question here about special needs children.
Okay.
Yeah, very special needs children are, I believe, slightly different to autistic, although could very well be similar things. Like, the children are here to teach us something, right? So we learn a lot from our children. And special needs children, I mean, the special needs children are just one big bundle of love. They're here to teach us about unconditional love. So I think the special needs children are very similar to animals. Their job on this planet is just to be, the Down syndrome children that I've connected with, have been with, they don't have an angry bone in their body or a fearful bone in their body. They're just bundles of love. They just want to be loved and hugged and love everybody. So, so disability is slightly different, but I think the special needs children in the sort of Down syndrome, I think, are there to help their parents evolve, if you like. Whereas, disabilities and things like that, again, I think that's kind of what the soul has chosen to experience in this lifetime. And going back to a loss of a child, I also find that a number of children that come into the body and then realize the body's not developing in the way, physically, in the way that they want for their life purpose, for what they want to experience this lifetime, they'll leave and then they'll come back again in another body. So maybe the body's too healthy or not healthy enough. There's the debate, maybe the body's not developing right, but they're here to be somebody that needs a really healthy body, or vice versa. So yeah, so everything kind of has to match up to be right. And sometimes it's just as simple as the body's not developing in the right way. So it may just be for those children that are coming in that you have the issue with just the lack, the heartbeat just stopping. It could just be that soul's just left just because the body's not developing right. Sometimes the souls get cold feet and they go, you know what, I've just changed my mind, I'm getting the hell out of here. Because I think it takes a lot of bravery for us to come here into human form, and not every soul spirit, if you like, is as brave as we are, because we're brave because we decided to stay. So there can be a whole number of different reasons, but there's usually some form of learning and experience on both sides.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Brahmri, please.
Yeah, that was only my question about special needs children. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Wonderful. Sharon, what about kids who have got congenital problems?
Oh, what, sorry?
Congenital problems. They're born with birth defects.
Born with birth defects.
Yeah, like when you're really otherwise checking them inside mom and doctors say they're absolutely okay, there's nothing wrong, and maybe after birth also you really cannot make out, and then suddenly you realize that there could be a congenital problem going on. There could be a birth defect because of which the baby isn't growing the way the baby should. So
from a physical point of view, then there would be quite often something that happens during pregnancy that some form of trauma that mum's experienced that affects the development of, I don't know, hole in the heart, for instance, or cleft palate or something like that. Or it could just be that's the way the baby's chosen. They want that experience as well. You know, there's quite some severe forms of birth defects, you know, with the hair lip and, you know, the deformed face and things like that. And when you look at most of what those children go on to achieve, it's absolutely amazing. So, you know, when I teach about life purpose, our life purpose isn't always what we think it is. And it's not always very clear, and sometimes we can, doesn't matter what we do in our life, it's our death that's important, you know, how we die and how we affect people. So I talk about, you know, some people have a very strong death purpose, and I always, whenever I say that, I always talk about the lady in India that was raped to death on a bus.
yes, Nirbhaya.
Like, nobody knew who she was before that, as far as I know, but the whole world got to hear about it when she died, how she died. So she may have not had a very strong life purpose, but she had a bloody strong death purpose, because that brought some level of awakening, realization. You know, you guys in India probably, you know and accept this goes on all the time. Like, we know that, you know, child molestation and all of that stuff goes
little
on.
babies, Sharon, literally out of the cradle. I mean, not even out of the cradle, in diapers are being raped here. So I don't want to go there, but it's really nasty. There is a question that Dr. Nutan has put for you, and she's saying, what could be the impact of having sex and masturbating during pregnancy on the child?
Depends again on the mother's point of view, mother and father's point of view. So if it's a pleasurable experience, then no negative effect on the baby at all. If mum's being forcibly, you know, she's not wanting this attention, then baby's going to be emotionally affected by that too. So again, remember that everything is if there's a lot of shame, for instance, during masturbation, then baby's receiving the shame. If it's just pure pleasure and, you know, feeling totally comfortable with pleasuring yourself, then baby just receives pleasure.
Okay.
You know, some women end up having an orgasm during giving birth as well. If you want to look up orgasmic birth on YouTube, then you know, it's always comes back to our point of view about something.
There is someone who wants to ask a question. I would ask her to just put it down privately to me. I will not mention your name, and because later for Sharon to come back and answer may be very difficult. So just put your question down, or you can WhatsApp to me. I have the phone right here. You don't have to, just WhatsApp the message to me and I will ask Sharon without disclosing the name. Yeah. So take the liberty of putting it on the WhatsApp. Thank you. Let's go to the next person. Jyoti Lalwani has a question. Jyoti, please go ahead.
Hi, Anu. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Jyoti.
Hi. It's been a lovely talk, very enlightening. I have two questions which are totally different. If you could be kind to answer both. One is we in India, as ancestrally, do talk about some defects in a physical body for a child happening due to the eclipses, which science doesn't believe in. So I was just wondering, in your experience, if you have anything to comment on the same. And then I'll ask the second question too. Have you, yeah.
Okay, let me answer that one first. It'll be a very short answer because that is that belief has never come across my awareness, so I've never looked out for that.
Okay.
So I think, you know, we can see patterns in anything we want to look at. So if somebody's actually done a study on that, but energetic, I mean, I like one of my best friends is an astrologer, so energetically I know, you know, like this super moon out here means that I'm probably only going to get 2 hours sleep tonight. You know, I know that the planets have an effect on us. I totally get that, and of course, you know, eclipses have an effect on us too. But I've never linked it to birth defects, so I can't really comment on that. But great question. I'll look out for it.
Okay, wonderful. I've got the question here.
Just a small question. Yeah, Anu, can I ask one
Yeah,
question?
please go ahead.
Sharon, I have a case who, now in India, what happens is we have a craze for a male child, okay, and we do not have a sex detection test allowed legally. So when the child is born and the mother discovers, let's say it's a second daughter or a third daughter in the family, and the mother goes through a little traumatic experience just when she has just delivered and asks the doctor what she delivered, you know, is it a boy or girl? Now, this also I have seen has an impact on children.
You're frozen, Jyoti.
In terms of feeling unwanted. Now, yes. My question, will EFT help in clearing this? Or does this continue? And could this also lead to a miscarriage in that? Since you were connecting grandmother and all with the Caroline's case, that's exactly why I thought. Would this also be connected with having a miscarriage later because she didn't want a child, you know? A mother who felt that she's unwanted, then goes ahead and has a miscarriage. I'm just wondering if there's a connection. If you could highlight.
There could absolutely be a connection, and there could also be a connection with infertility as well. So the baby being the wrong sex, I mean, I've had a lot of women that I've worked with who are Indian and exactly have that issue because it was very, you know, they felt that disappointment from their mother and their father because they were a girl. And, you know, as we know, you know, in India, the boys are more prized, or more highly thought of and wanted than the girls are. So, yeah, it is a big trauma for the baby. Obviously, it's a trauma for the mum.
Can EFT?
Yes.
Can EFT hear this?
Yes, because
do it like the inner child. How would you do that? You would do it imagining that it's a small self, the way you explained for Caroline?
Yes, you would tap on the younger self for her feelings of not being good enough, of being the wrong sex, of being rejected. There's a level of difficulty here. So let's just say if the mother was continue to punish that child for being a girl through the whole of the childhood, then it's going to take a lot more sessions to, if mum then just and dad totally accept that child as being a girl in the end, then that's an easier, if you like, because they haven't had layers of trauma on top of that. But basically you explain to the child that, or to the baby, that this is just a cultural belief. You know, this is the thing that's been passed down about boys being better than girls. And you let that baby know that it's not personal. And then if you can do some tapping on mum and dad for their reaction to this child, and then see if you can get the mum and dad in the matrix to accept and connect and bond with this child.
Okay.
again,
Can you
it
do
is.
EFT without the parents having the knowledge of it?
Yes.
Energetically, it is possible.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your answers. Yeah,
Very well.
that was helpful. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I have this very, very important question here. The lady doesn't want to ask herself. So she's married, she has a child who was created with the first IVF. She, after a few years, started getting attracted to another man in her life. Nobody knows about it. And in fact, she's met this man a couple of times, and she's very upset with herself for doing it. And when she heard your story about IVF and the third person in between, she's wondering whether that third person in between is making her create that third person in between. And also she's saying, will that impact her child, and will she also carry the story? Because she's struggling right now to drop her attachment from this man. She's not even like attracted to him, and yet she's like, how do you say, she still goes and meets him.
Okay.
And she seems to have, so somebody who's very controlled, very systematic, doesn't seem to have control over her mind and control over her body. So she needs your input over there. Thank you.
So if this lady was my client, the first place I'd be looking at would be what is lacking within her relationship with her partner that's making her want to go and look elsewhere, but also the concept of like her child being an IVF person, unless she was the IVF person, then she would be wanting a third person in the relationship. So that doesn't quite follow. Of course, if it becomes public and people or her child gets to know about the situation, her husband gets to know about this situation, then of course that's going to affect her child. But energetically, within a family, let's look at it like this. So we
Okay,
give off.
She's not an IVF, but she was almost an IVF. I mean, the doctors had told her that she will need an IVF, but she didn't need an IVF. She just sent me a message. Yeah.
So
sorry.
Yeah. So within any relationship, you have the man, you have the woman, or whatever. Let's just go with the normal man-woman partnership, and then you have a child, and the child lives in the energy between the man and the woman. So even so energetically, let's just call it energetically, the child's going to be picking up on there's something not quite right with the relationship. My guess is the husband is already picking up on something. So at some point, there's quite likely, unless the relationship finishes or unless they're very careful and can keep this relationship separate, intuitively people they're already going to have an idea that something's not right. And energetically that affects people too. I mean, of course, you know, I really feel for her being in this situation where she's attracted to this non-attractive man, and it could be that there is some past life karma going on here, you know, some unresolved karma going on here. I'd also want to talk to this person about her relationship with her own parents. What did she learn about relationships from her parents? You know, was her father, you know, unfaithful to her mother, or her mother unfaithful to her father? Is this an ancestral thing that's playing out here? I don't personally see this being as a birth thing playing out here, more of an ancestral or a past life thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There are two more questions. One is from Dhruti, the lady who read your book and brought it home. So Dhruti, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you, Sharon. I'm really, really grateful.
Hi, Anu. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Dhruti.
Your book is amazing. I read it. It's wonderful. I just love that book.
Thank you.
I have one more. It's not really a question. It's some. I have a curiosity. I would like to know more about twin birth. I have twins, and delivered through C-section. So how does that impact the child?
So how old are your twins?
They are 11.
They're 11. And they
Yeah.
are they? What sex are they?
Boys.
Boys. They're both boys.
Yeah, both boys.
Okay. So what are their relationship like?
So earlier they were quite friendly, quite attached to each other. Of late, yes, they have been fighting in a. It's like some kind of a race where it's like I first and you first, and who is better, and who is. That race is going on since I think last 1 year.
Okay, so that's kind of normal development, if you like, in the fact that they're now jostling for positions. That's more of a hormonal change starting to happen. The fact that they were pretty inseparable, because the thing is with twins, everybody imagines that twins are what the story you've just said, you know, they're inseparable, they go everywhere together, they know what each other are thinking. And that happens for a lot of twins, but that's not always the case, because what they've discovered by studying twins in the womb is that they don't always get on, especially if there's some threat to survival going on. So maybe there's not enough of something, not enough nutrition, for instance. So, and one twin can develop to be bigger than the other twin, and that twin can actually be seen to be dominating the other twin.
Yeah, so on and off, they take turns. Earlier, the second one used to dominate. Now the elder one, the firstborn child, dominates. So, but they take turns. It's not
take turns in
constant.
dominating. That's brilliant. Yeah. So, twins are usually like they're usually, but you can have twins that are different because their births can be different. You know, maybe one birth will come out a vaginal birth and the other one has to be a C-section. Or if they were both C-section, then you have one coming out before the other. So there can be a little bit of tussle about who's oldest because, you know, one came out before the other one. But generally, you know, they're very well connected, and the stories, you know, there's some really lovely stories about twins, and one of my favorite ones is where this lady, she was having a scan, and on the scan they could see that one of the twins had a leak coming from the amniotic cord, from the umbilical cord. And basically the doctor said, look, you know, this is quite a big leak, and we think that you know, the twin is, you know, this particular baby is not going to survive, so don't be surprised if this twin doesn't make it. And while the doctor's having this conversation, they're watching the two babies on the screen, and they see how the healthier twin that doesn't have the problem maneuvers itself in a position and blocks where the leak is. And basically that baby stays in that position for 2 weeks.
Wow.
In order for the weaker twin, the twin that had the problem, to survive. So the twin stayed there long enough in order for that twin to develop enough to be able to be, you know, to be born and survive on the outside world. So, you know, they can be very, very close in that way, in the fact that they realize there's something wrong with the other twin. It can be a loss of a twin can be very traumatic to people. So there's actually quite a high case of percentage of women who actually do conceive twins, but one twin will leave in the first trimester, and that can be very harrowing to the other twin. You know, the baby that survives. There's, as you know, there's a story in my book about that, so I'm not going to go into that now. But twins are very special. They're very connected, as you know. They can, you know, they can drive each other crazy, but God help anybody else. They can drive you quite crazy. So yeah, they're just amazing. They're just amazing. Well, all kids are amazing, but I think twins must be pretty special, really. And do they have this sort of like language within themselves that, you know, only they understand?
Yeah, that is there since I think they were 6-7 months, where they had their own way of communicating things, and they used to do, still they do that.
Yes, there's a lovely video on YouTube that I show in my course with twin boys having a conversation, and they're just talking to each other, and it's very, very sweet. So
Wow.
yeah, I think twins are generally, you know, they're pretty sorted most of the time, unless one has a dominance issue that's usually generated in the womb, then they're usually pretty good. So.
Okay.
So there is.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you,
You're
Anu.
welcome.
Thank you so much. Aarti has a question again. I think this time it's about animals, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, go ahead, Aarti.
So Sharon, I just wanted to know the way we are seeing how the impact is of human mother, what she is going through on the human babies. But when it comes to animals, so there are two parts which I wanted to see if you can, you know, shed some light to it. One is the impact of the babies when the mother is going through a traumatic, the dog mother or the cat mother is going through a traumatic environment. Because there are a lot of stray animals, they're going through a lot of traumatic, you know, some dogs are getting poisoned when the mother is getting poisoned, but the babies are born, but again, there is trauma related to that. So can the babies have certain behavioral patterns because of that, or related to survival, there could be issues to that?
Yes, I mean, animals kind of experience trauma the same way as we do. So if the mother's pregnant and, you know, somebody tries to poison her or is a threat to her life, then the chances are it's going to have a physical impact on the puppies, but also an emotional impact on them as well. So it may be that, you know, they never trust people, for instance, or they become aggressive, or they become very submissive. Even it can go completely the other way. So yeah, it's just horrible, just what we do to animals. You know, so I'm having to walk around because I'm currently living in Thailand right now, which wasn't planned. I was only meant to be here for a month, and I've been here for 2 months now, and probably staying to the end of July. But I'm having to walk around with some little blinkers on as well for, you know, some of the state of the animals here. And I've been to India too, so I've seen how animals are treated there. So it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough being a mother, whether you're a human mother or an animal mother. So yeah, trauma. And again, you know, like I said with the mice, you know, they were taught that, you know, cherry blossom was a dangerous scent. So, you know, these puppies are learning in utero that, you know, humans are dangerous. So, you know, they'll probably be the ones that don't want to trust humans unless the mother's lucky enough to be, you know, have good contact with some good humans that teach the puppies otherwise. But not good. And one day we're all going to wake up and we'll treat our animals and our planet a little bit better, and we'll treat our babies a lot better. And one of the lovely things about my book was when I was writing my book, I kind of would sit in meditation, and I treat my book is kind of like has its own life to it. You know, it was like conceiving a baby and nurturing that baby and then birthing the baby and sending it out to school. So it's out working at the moment. And I asked in meditation, you know, what is the purpose of the book? And what I got back was that the information that in the future babies are not going to need to be born with the same level of trauma that we're born into now. So the purpose of the book is partly education about how to heal trauma in the past, how to prevent trauma happening now, which means in the future generations will not have the birth trauma.
Wow.
Because so that was like very humbling to actually, you know, connect with that information, but also very hopeful to know that women in the future are not going to, you know, be giving birth in the same traumatic way as we are right now. I don't know how far into the future that is. I'd like to think it's in my lifetime, but maybe not, but we'll see.
Thank you so much. The other question to this is that as humans, we are taking charge and we are going in sterilizing and neutering dogs. And that is definitely having an impact on them. So on the spiritual side, or, you know, any kind of information that you can share on that aspect.
Oh, from a spiritual side, from a human side, I actually think a lot of animals are happier that way, because it's, you know, again, being here in Thailand, I'm seeing a lot of unneutered dogs, and I'm seeing a lot of the impact on what it's like to be a young dog right now, having to walk past the territory of a dog that's guarding its territory. It can be quite tough being a street dog right now in Thailand, and seeing the horrible conditions they get into with the mites and things. So from that human perspective, I actually quite comfortable with neutering, and I actually think the dogs are happier that way too. From a long-term point of view, obviously, like, we don't want to neuter all the dogs, otherwise there would end up being no dogs at all. But I do think that, you know, without sounding like somebody, he who should not be named right now, I do think that there's enough animals right now to keep the world going without too many, because if the animals are all taken care of, that's one thing, but there's so many animals suffering on the world because they're, you know, nobody's taking care of them, and they're unable to take care of themselves because there's not enough food and stuff, then I'm quite into preventing suffering in that way, especially when it's animals. You know, I'm not so bothered about human suffering, I'm more concerned about animal suffering. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, this was such an amazing session, and now I can tell
questions.
Questions. Anybody? Last question. Call number 1,
questions.
Call number 2, call number 3. Anybody with questions? Any more questions?
So there's a question here. Sometimes organ of the baby do not develop, or cord. Some vessels not develop properly. What is the cause behind this, especially while gestational period? Again, there can be a number of reasons for that. There can be it can be something as simple as toxicity in the body. I also think there's some past life stuff going on there as well, just tuning into that sort of a question. I think I've had a woman that I've worked with who wasn't able to have a successful pregnancy because the baby's body just, she was, let's put it in a more basic way, she was unable to conceive and grow a baby's body that was you know, fully sustainable for life, if you like. And she had to have a number of terminations and miscarriages that she lost the baby herself. And again, it turned out to be a past life thing, and she went into a lifetime where she was a perpetrator of children. Not a very nice lifetime, and it's quite interesting that when I do other lifetime stuff, past lifetime, it's usually we go and look for that victim lifetime. Sometimes we need to go and find that lifetime where we were the perpetrator as well. And of course, most perpetrators were originally victims too. So it could be something as a karmic thing that's just being redressed in this lifetime that needs to, you know, that can be sorted by going to look at a past life thing. It can just, again, it could be something around the belief systems, around not feeling good enough in order to be a mother. But it's got to be a very strong belief that could be going on there as well. I haven't come across it too much, and I know it's something that happens, you know, this malformation of babies seems to be very much more common, I think, in India, for instance. You know, I was quite surprised when I went to India to see the amount of, you know, people that were handicapped and disfigured, and, you know, some of the TV programs I've seen. So, you know, this could be like deep Indian karma that you guys are working your way through, you know, for stuff that's happened in the Indian karma in the past, for instance. So yeah, I haven't had a lot of experience in that, so I can't really say much more than that, but it feels karma for me.
Wow.
You know, because each country has its own karma, and we choose where we want to be born. You know, it's quite interesting being here in Thailand. I'm actually getting to learn a lot about Israel, because there's a lot of Israeli people here, you know, and there's, you know, obviously there's a lot of karma going on in Israel as well, with all the stuff that's happened to them. You know, there's a lot of karma in Ireland, closer to, you know, home in England. So it's like each country, if you like, has its karma, and I believe that we choose to be born in Africa or India or UK or Australia or Zimbabwe, because we want to experience that cultural karma as well. And I also believe that we kind of incarnate the same nationality quite a long time, for quite a few lifetimes too. So that's just my personal belief.
There's a question on the forum, and says deep fear of pregnancy, and women who have deep fear of pregnancy and delivery and then decide not to go for pregnancy, can that be related to past life or something else? I also know of women who are scared to have an intercourse. They are scared to have sex because they're just scared. They don't know why they're scared.
Okay, so again, it could be all of those things. It can be a past life experience. It's most likely something that they learned as a child through observation, something that they've been taught by their mother. Maybe their own birth experience was very traumatic, and mum continued to tell them, you know, how traumatic it was giving birth to you. I know certainly Sasha Allenby has talked about this. She wrote the first book with Carl, where she talks about where her mum continued to tell her throughout all her childhood how she split her open and made her bleed, because her mother tore when she was giving birth, and, you know, she felt a lot of guilt around that because, you know, she injured her mother. So it could be something, you know, as simple as that, and I'm saying simple, obviously not simple for the mother giving birth, but it could be that fear around being pregnant and having children has developed from that childhood experience, or being told stories from other people about, you know, traumatic birth. And it quite often can come from your own birth experience as well, but it could be past life, could be ancestral as well. So, you know, worth looking, because obviously your mum gave birth to you, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but it could be something that's passed down from the ancestors.
Wonderful. Any more questions, or can I do 2 cards for Sharon? She's been so kind.
I know I'm ready, huh?
You are ready? Wow. I had actually pulled out the cards thinking you're not there.
No, I told you I'll come, so
wonderful. So we have this beautiful person, Binayfer, and thank you so much, Sharon.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, we shifted the time, and then I got confused again. Then I gave you a call, and then we shifted the time again, and we still have people on the forum. So just beautiful that was. It just, somebody said to me when I was running around trying to organize everything just before you came on air was, there is always a right time. Don't worry.
There is always a right time, exactly.
Yeah.
Just like birth, there's always a right time to be born.
Absolutely.
When all the planets are aligned, then that's it.
Absolutely. We have a special guest for you who is going to be reading cards for you.
Ooh, exciting.
You've done such amazing stuff for us today. So this is a little gift back from us to you. And this is the lady who has been doing cards for us for the last few days. And she's been wonderful. Thank you, Binaifa. Can we see you? You got such a pretty
Thank you.
face.
I know today there's something wrong with my video. It's just not coming on.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
You're still beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. So, Sharon, one was a jumping card for you, and the other two I picked up. So, I would like to talk about the jumping card first. That is Archangel Uriel, who is saying, you know what to do, trust your inner knowledge, and act upon it without delay. That was the first card. Second card, which has come in reverse, is Archangel Ariel, who is saying, do not hold back right now. The timing is perfect and you are ready to soar. Spread your wings. So that is come in reverse. So maybe you're not doing it. For whatever reason you're holding back, please don't. Just leap ahead because this is the time. And the third card, which I picked up for you, is Angel Vanessa, who is saying to make your decision, ask yourself which way brings me closer to my divine purpose, which way takes me away from it. So basically, you know what is to be done, just go ahead.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay. Which way takes me closer to my divine purpose? Which way takes me away? Okay.
Away from it, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's do reading for Sumita Mendirata.
Okay. Sumita, do you have any questions?
Sumita, do you have any question? No.
No. Okay. So should we choose somebody else then? I can't even see her, or she's there or not, we don't know. Na?
I have no idea whether she's there. Manisha.
Ha.
Manisha.
Okay. Hi, Manisha. Any questions?
Hi. No question.
Okay. Manisha, I picked up 2 tarot cards for you. So one is you're going to get the fruits of your labor. As much as you put in the efforts, you're going to reap only that much of a benefit. So this is the time for you to be an apprentice. This is the time for you to learn something from scratch. And that is going to help you gain a lot financially as well. The other thing I got for you is somebody or some emotion from your childhood or past is going to come back to trouble you. So try and be emotionally strong. This is somewhat like a warning for you, I feel, that just be emotionally balanced and don't let things from the past disturb you and spoil your happiness.
Okay.
Thank you.
Neeta Krishnani.
Neeta, any questions? Neeta?
I can't hear her. Okay, so let's go to the next person. There. Okay, let's do for Ashish.
Okay. Ashish, any questions?
No question.
Okay. Ashish, for you, I got to pick up one angel card as well. So the card is talking about being safe and powerful. So it's Angel Athena who's saying it is safe for you to be powerful. You know how to be powerful in a loving way that benefits others as well as yourself. And this is come in the reverse, so you're not doing that. So please go ahead and claim the power and claim the person who you are. And the other thing is try not to be emotionally troubled by things that don't bother you, and the things which are not very relevant. So just try to come out of the nitty-gritty and look at things at a larger picture.
Wonderful.
Thank you, ma'am.
We pick up Brahmari. Let's do for her.
Any questions?
Brahmari, you have any question? No. Mitra?
No, I don't have any questions. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you might get some ancestral property or money, something, some ancestral good news is coming your way. And you might be feeling right now that, you know, nobody's appreciating me for what I am or how much I'm doing. So it will happen, you will be appreciated. You are a person who can do a lot. You can guide people a lot spiritually. And basically, like, you know, try and be a counselor to them, show them the light, show them what they are worth, and basically be a teacher to a lot of people. So please go ahead and do that. It will be really gratifying for you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Binaifa, could you do the last one for the whole group? Everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I picked up one angel card and one tarot card. So the angel card is Angel Rochelle, who says that as you honor and follow the guidance of your heart, prosperity is coming your way. So all of us are going to be really prosperous. So absorb those energies. And the second card, the tarot card, in fact, also talks about money, but talks about money in a way that we should not trust hearsay about people trying to convince or coax us into investing or spending money in the wrong way, basically. So be alert and try to manage your finances properly. So, and it's also the other way for people who are too stingy and not spending. So basically be balanced in your finances, because prosperity will come your way.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.